What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. Today, I'll be doing my early 2026 NASCAR Cup Series silly season predictions. I'm going to go through all the full-time entries and the part-time entries for the 2026 season. So anyways, let's go ahead and just jump straight into it. We're going to start to talk about the one car for Trackhouse Racing. I don't expect any change by 2026. I think Ross Chastain will still be in the one car in 2026. Well, Ross Chastain contract, from what I understand, is only through 2025. I do expect that he's going to get a multi-year extension and agreement with Trackhouse. With how well he's been running with Trackhouse Racing over the last couple of years, I think he sticks around, and I think he'll continue driving the one car in 2026. Up next, how about the two car for Team Penske? I don't expect any changes by 2026. I think Austin will still be driving the two car by 2026. While I do think there's a chance he'd be let go at the end of 2025 with his father being the president of Team Penske, I don't see Austin going anywhere anytime soon. His performance is definitely going to have to step up a lot more so he can keep the seat long term, but there won't be any changes. He'll still be in the two car once again in 2026. Up next, how about the three car for Richard Childress Racing? Well, the rumor is speculation that Austin Dillon could retire at the end of 2024. I do think Austin Dillon is going to stick around for the next years. He actually confirmed it at the Chicago Street Course not too long ago that he'll be staying in the three car for at least the next 2 years. Now, I do think 2026 more than likely will be the last year for Austin Dillon in the Cup Series full time before he does go in an executive role. But I do think Austin Dillon will continue being the three car in the 2026 season. Up next, how about the five car for Hendrick Motorsports? There won't be any changes to the five as Kyle Larson has a contract through the 2026 season. And I do expect that Kyle Larson is going to get a multi-year contract extension with Hendrick Motorsports. Kyle Larson's been incredible over the course of the last few years. He's been incredible. Hendrick Motorsports, one of the greatest in Hendrick's history, and is one of the best drivers in NASCAR history to this point. And Larson will continue winning races and competing for championships long term. He's got a chance to win multiple championships by 2026. Up next, how about the six car for RFK Racing? I don't expect any changes by the 2026 season. I do believe Brad Keselowski will still be in the six car by this point. Now, I could see Brad Keselowski potentially retiring at the end of 2026, but I think Brad stated about a month or two ago that he's not planning to retire anytime soon. Brad will be 42 at the end of the 2026 season, but Brad has been so competitive over the last year, and he's been really helping building up the program at RFK. So I don't think any changes are coming. I think Brad Keselowski will be in the six car once again in the 2026 season. Up next, how about the seven car for Spire Motorsports? I think there's going to be some pretty big changes coming over there in 2026. I do think more than likely Zane Smith might get the seat in 2025, but I think there's going to be a massive driver change. As I predict that Kyle Busch will leave RCR at the end of 2025 and join Spire Motorsports in 2026. This makes a lot of sense. Kyle Busch has really worked with them in the past. He works with their Truck Series program. They bought his Truck Series program and is driven for them. And there's talks that maybe he can come over there and maybe take an ownership role in the future. There's a chance that this also could happen in 2025. But I do believe in the 2026 season, you will see Kyle Busch leave RCR and go to Spire Motorsports. Up next, how about the A car for Richard Childress Racing? With Kyle Busch more than likely leaving RCR, in my opinion, for 2025, I think the A car is going to have a new driver, and that is going to be Austin Hill. I think Austin Hill moves up to the Cup Series full-time in 2026. I think he's going to make some select starts over the course of the next 2 years, including in 2025, and I think he moves up next season. I think Austin Hill's been doing a really good job in the Xfinity Series, and he's done okay in the Cup races, though he really hasn't had the greatest of performances. Nonetheless, I do think Austin Hill will move up in 2026. Up next, how about the 9 car for Hendrick Motorsports? There won't be any changes to the 9 car in 2026 as Chase Elliott has a contract with Hendrick through 2027. Now, I do also think that Chase Elliott more than likely is going to get a multi-year extension with this organization going forward, and I do think he'll stick around for the foreseeable future with the team, probably finish his whole entire Cup career with this organization. I expect more wins and him to still be competing for a championship for many years down the road. Up next up at the 10 car for Haas Factory. Yes, I think Haas Factory is going to run a second part-time entry in 2026. And I think more than likely they're going to put the current drivers that might be in those cars next year, and that might be Hailie Deegan and Ryan Preece. I think Ryan Preece will potentially make some more cup starts with his organization. I think he's going to get a majority of starts in the select race they run with this car, and I think Hailie Deegan will make her cup debut. I think both get the chance and opportunity, and I think you'll see a second Haas Factory car for the 2026 season, as I do think there's a chance they could run in 2025, but most likely also in 2026. Up next up the 11 car for 2311 Racing. I think Denny Hamlin's going to shockingly take the 11 with him, because I think Denny Hamlin's going to leave Joe Gibbs Racing and retire from full-time racing at the end of 2025. And I think he takes the 11 car with him over to 2311, and this becomes the fourth part-time entry. I think you might see drivers like Denny Hamlin, Martin Truex Jr., maybe Kurt Busch Carlers if they want to come out of retirement, or maybe Sheldon Creed perhaps as well. I think Denny Hamlin brings his car over with him over to 2311 Racing in the 2026 NASCAR Cup Series season. Up next up with the 12th car for Team Penske. There won't be any changes by 2026 as Ryan Blaney has a multi-year contract with Team Penske, and of course he just won the championship about a year ago. Ryan Blaney's been doing a really good job with Team Penske, and I do expect that he's going to continue getting better for many years down the road. So there won't be any changes for 2026 as Ryan Blaney will stay in this car for the long term and the foreseeable future with Team Penske. Up next out the 13 car for Kaulig Racing. I think Kaulig Racing is going to run a third part-time entry in 2026. I think it's going to be a mixture of multiple drivers. AJ Allmendinger, Daniel Hemrick, and Christian Eckes most likely. I think Christian will make a few starts in this car because I think he's going to run a majority of races in the 16. I think you also see AJ and Daniel Hemrick get a couple starts, but I don't think they're going to run a majority of races next year, but they'll bring back the 13 car for 2026. Up next up with the 15 car for Rick Ware Racing. There will be some changes coming to the team in 2026, though I do think they're going to have a rotation amount of drivers behind the wheel. And I look at drivers like Kaz Grala, Ryan Preece, Harrison Burton, and Cody Ware. I think they're going to have a lot of drivers in the Ford camp getting a chance, maybe Hailie Deegan as well, perhaps Chica driving the seat as well. But I do think you're going to see multiple drivers get behind the wheel, and I think you'll mostly see Cody Ware in a lot of these races, but Kaz Grala also getting more starts in this team. Up next up at the 16 car for Kaulig Racing. Very similar to 2024 and what I kind of expect for 2025. I do think the 16 car is going to be a rotation car between Christian Eckes and AJ Allmendinger, with Christian Eckes getting most of the starts behind the wheel. Christian is being looked at by multiple teams and organizations, and I think he does move up to Cup potentially at least part-time. And I think he's going to run a majority race in 2026 as well, with Kaulig Racing in the 16 car. Up next up with the 17 car for RFK Racing. There won't be any changes to the seat as Chris Buescher has a long-term contract with RFK Racing. Chris has been really solid with RFK Racing for many, many seasons, and I think this will continue for many years down the road. He's got a lot of talent, can do the best out of equipment, and make the equipment run fast. I don't think anything changes. I think you will still see him continue to drive the number 17 car in the 2026 NASCAR Cup Series season. Up next up at the 18 car for Joe Gibbs Racing. There will be a number change, and I think the 11 car that Denny Hamlin had, because I think Chandler Smith is going to replace Denny Hamlin at JGR in 2026, and he'll take the number 18 seat. I think they're going to bring back the 18 car. Maybe they try to find a way to get M&M's back, but most likely that's not going to happen. But I think with Chandler Smith, how well he's been doing in Xfinity, I think gets one more year full-time next year, and then moves up full-time to the Cup Series, and they bring back the number 18 car for the first time since 2022. I think it happens. I think you will see the 18 car make a comeback with Chandler Smith. Up next up in the 19 car for Joe Gibbs Racing. There won't be any changes in 2026 as Chase Briscoe has a multi-year agreement with Joe Gibbs Racing that will start next year. I think Chase Briscoe is going to have a really strong year in 2025, picking up multiple wins and victories, and I think that he'll have a very good run also in 2026, as I do expect that chemistry between him and James Small to potentially get better. So there won't be any changes. We'll see Chase Briscoe, in my opinion, continue driving the number 19 car in 2026. Up next, up the 20 car for Joe Gibbs Racing. There won't be any changes in 2026 as Christopher Bell has a long-term contract with Joe Gibbs Racing. And I only expect Christopher Bell to get actually better. He's been really good, doing a fantastic job with JGR over the course of the last few years. And I do think Christopher Bell is one of the most talented drivers currently in the Cup Series. So there won't be any changes. We'll see Christopher Bell continue to drive the number 20 car in the 2026 NASCAR Cup Series season. Up next, how about the 21 car for the Wood Brothers? We won't be seeing any changes more than likely as Josh Berry has a multi-year agreement with the Wood Brothers. We don't know how well he's going to perform without Rodney Childers working with him. I do think you're going to see Josh Berry do an extremely well job with the Wood Brothers. He's a very talented race car driver and can absolutely get the best out of equipment. So there won't be any changes in 2026. I've got Josh Berry getting behind the wheel of the 21 car in the 2026 NASCAR Cup Series season. Up next, how about the 22 car for Team Penske? I don't expect any changes by 2026. I do think Joe Logano is going to stay in the 22 car. While Logano has not had the greatest performance in recent years, we know every even year usually is when Joe Logano generally performs. And I do think that will absolutely continue in the 2026 year. I think Logano's only going to get better as he gets older, and I think the performance is going to improve. There won't be any changes other than that. We'll see Logano in the 22 car once again. Up next, how about the 23 car for 2311 Racing? While it's not been officially confirmed, Bubba Wallace is expected to sign a multi-year contract extension with 2311 Racing. Bubba's been doing a really good job with 2311, gets better every year. It seems like everyone thinks he's taking a step backwards this year. His performance has generally been good. And I could see Bubba Wallace having multiple wins and victories again by this point, and maybe having a chance to win his first ever championship. Nonetheless, Bubba Wallace, in my opinion, will stay in the 23 car in 2026. Up next, how about the 24 car for Hendrick Motorsports? Well, we don't know how long William Byron's contract goes through. We know it goes through 2025. We are expecting that William Byron is going to get a multi-year extension with Hendrick Motorsports. William Byron's been amazing at Hendrick over the last couple of years and is tied for being the winningest driver in the next-gen era with Kyle Larson. So there won't be any changes. I see Rudy Fugle and William Byron continue to work together for many years to come, and we'll see William Byron in the 24 car once again in 2026. Up next, how about the 31 car for Kaulig Racing? I think this is going to be the only full-time entry car that has one driver behind the wheel, and I think it's going to be driven by Zane Smith. I think Zane Smith's going to get one more year potentially at Spire Motorsports unless he goes to Front Row Motorsports, and then I think he's going to be driving for Kaulig Racing full-time. But I do think Trackhouse Racing is going to be building all the cars that he runs because I still think he's going to be under contract with Trackhouse Racing for a very long time. I don't see him ever going into the Trackhouse family, unfortunately, at this point. I could be wrong, but I do think Zane Smith will be full-time in a Kaulig Racing seat in the 2026 NASCAR Cup Series season. Up next, up with the 33 car for Richard Childress Racing. Yes, I think RSR is going to run a third car once again part-time in the 2026 season with Jesse Love, Will Brown, and maybe Brody Kosecki as well. I think Jess Love's going to get a majority of starts behind the wheels. I think they're going to try to prepare him to go cup racing in the future. And I think they find a way to bring Will Brown over for a few races as well. I think his car comes back part-time with multiple drivers behind the wheel in 2026. Up next, up with the 34 car for Front Row Motorsports. This car I do expect to be driven by Noah Gragson in 2025, and I do think that continues in 2026. We don't know the numbers officially for Front Row this year, but many do believe it's going to be the 34 for Noah Gragson, as Loves will continue sponsoring Noah Gragson, in my opinion, in 2026. I expect Noah to be a playoff threat and contender, and I do think Noah Gragson will do a great job at Front Row, as he will be joining Front Row Motorsports in 2025, and also has a multi-year deal with this team and organization. Up next, top of the 36 car for Front Row Motorsports. I think Front Row is going to use the 36 car, and I think this car will be driven by Sam Mayer. I think Sam Mayer could move up to Cup full-time next year. There's been talking go to Spire, but I think with him being the lead candidate for the Front Row organization, I do think he's going to be with Front Row for multiple years. Sam is going to be relatively young by this point, but I do expect him to have a little bit of learning curve, but get better by the end of these years. And I think Sam Mayer will get better, and I think he will join Front Row Motorsports for sure in 2025 and be with the team also in 2026. Up next, how about the 38 car for Front Row Motorsports? There won't be any change to this car as Todd Gillen has a multi-year contract with Front Row Motorsports. Todd has been incredible this year so far, and I do expect that is only going to get better for many years down the road. He's extremely talented, always gets the best out of equipment, and runs up front, it seems like. I do think Todd Gillen will do great things as he will continue driving number 38 car in 2025 and also in 2026. Up next, up with the 41 car for Haas Factory. I think Haas Factory is going to continue running in 2026 with Cole Custer behind the wheel of the car. Cole only has a one-year deal with the organization, but I do think that unless they do find a way to sell a charter, they're going to be back in the series. I think Cole Custer is going to do okay in his first year, but I do think by the second year, they're really hopefully going to improve with him having a second part-time entry. I do think you see them with that RFK Alliance. I do think they start to really show their speed. Up next, up with the 42 car for Legacy Motor Club. I don't expect any changes by 2026. I do think John Hunter Nemechek will be behind the wheel of this seat once again. While John Hunter has struggled in certain instances in points this year, I do think he's going to get better in 2025. I think that's going to lead to him getting another contract extension with Legacy Motor Club going into the future, as he's probably going to be on a free agent at the end of 2025. He'll need to do better. Up next, up with the 43 car for Legacy Motor Club. I don't expect any changes by 2026. I think Eric Jones will be back in the 43 car for the foreseeable future. Well, there's been rumors he hasn't signed a multi-year contract. From what I understand, he's trying to get a multi-year deal done with Legacy Motor Club at this moment. I think he will stick around for sure, and I do think he will continue driving the 43 car for many years to come, including in the 2026 NASCAR Cup Series season. Up next, up with the 44 car for NY Racing. I do think NY Racing is going to come back part-time in 2026 with JJ Yeley. I think they're only going to run around 5 to 10 races, and with JJ getting a little bit older, I don't expect him to run full-time by this point. I think they do come back, though, for sure, and I do think JJ Yeley will be behind the wheel of this number 44 car for sure in the 2026 NASCAR Cup Series season. Up next, up with the 45 car for 23XI Racing. There won't be any changes by this point as Tyler Reddick has a long-term contract with 23XI. And Tyler Reddick, let's be real, has been the greatest driver in 23XI Racing history and could win a championship by this point. I think Tyler Reddick will continue to get better. He will have a chance and opportunity, and I do think the speed will continue being there for Tyler Reddick for many years to come. So he'll continue sticking around with the team and look to win more races with 23XI Racing going into the near future. Up next, up with the 47 car for JTG Doherty Racing. Now, by this point, I don't think it's going to be called JTG Doherty. I think there's going to be new ownership coming into this team. Maybe Kevin Harvick finds a way to enter the ownership side. And I do think Stenhouse 6 behind the wheel. We're not even sure if they're going to be a Chevy team at this point. But I do think for sure Ricky Stenhouse Jr. will be behind the wheel of this organization for sure in the 2025 NASCAR Cup Series season going into the near future. Up next, up with the 48 car for Hendrick Motorsports. There won't be any changes as Alex Bowman has a contract through the 2026 season with Hendrick. And while he technically will be a free agent at the end of the 2026 year, I do think he's going to get a multi-year extension with the team. Ally really likes him. They're committed through 2028, which is where I think the extension is going to last to. And I do think he's a very talented race car driver, and I think he will continue to get better and get more wins. So I think Alex Bowman isn't going to be going anywhere anytime soon for the near future. Up next, how about the 50 car for Team Ambervet Racing? This, of course, being the money team. I think this team's going to run a lot of races in 2026 as they eventually want to go full-time in the near future, but they're likely going to need a charter for this to happen. I think there's a great chance that this happens. I think that Ty Dillon will run a lot of races, and I do think he'll be behind the wheel of this Team Ambervet organization for 2025 potentially, and also in 2026. Up next, up with the 51 car for Rick Ware Racing. I don't think anything changes for 2026. I think Justin Elliott will get behind the wheel of this seat once again. While teams have been looking at Justin Elliott in recent months, I think Justin Elliott is committed to eventually going over to RFK. If Brad Keselowski does, in fact, end up retiring in 2026, I think that's where Justin Elliott will go in 2027. But I do think in 2026, you see Justin Elliott stick around and continue driving a Rick Ware Racing car for the long-term future. Up next, up with the 54 car for Joe Gibbs Racing. There won't be any changes this seat as Ty Gibbs has a long-term contract, and of course being the grandson of Joe Gibbs really helps his case. Ty's been doing a really good job with Joe Gibbs Racing in recent years and recent seasons. I think Ty's a very solid race car driver, so there won't be any changes for the 2026 year, as Ty Gibbs will stay in his car, and I think he'll start winning some races in the near future. Up next up with the 60 car for RFK Racing. This, of course, being a Sage 60 car. I think this car will have a few drivers. I think Cam Waters potentially. I think Haley Deegan potentially. And I think maybe Joey Hand and Matt DiBenedetto as well. I think with the RFK Alliance, which of course are an RFK car, I think you see this team run some more races once again in 2025. And maybe they decide to commit and run the Sage 60 car full time in 2026. Up next, top of the 62 car for Beer Motorsports. I think Beer Motorsports is still going to be sticking around in the sport for 2026. And I think it'll be driven by Anthony Alfredo and Parker Retzlaff once again, because I think they're still going to be in Xfinity in some sort of capacity by this point. With both drivers already driven for Beard, I think it makes a lot of sense for them to continue driving for the team, and I think it'll be split between Anthony Alfredo and Parker Retzlaff for the 2026 NASCAR Cup Series season. Up next, up with the 6.6 car for NBM Motorsports. Yes, I think NBM Motorsports will be back in Cup on a few select races, and I think this car will be mainly driven by Timmy Hill, though we could see David Starr or maybe Sage Karen perhaps get the chance and opportunity. I think they do come back for sure with Timmy Hill getting majority starts behind the wheel of this team, definitely for the 2026 NASCAR Cup season. Up next, up with the 67 car for 2311 Racing. I don't think anything changes for this car because it is expected that Riley Herbst will get behind the wheel of the seat for 2025. And I do think he signs a multi-year deal with this team because of the sponsorship and funding that's really going to need it for the charter and the fact that Monster is coming on. And with the three-car rule, they're going to keep him around. So I think you're going to see Riley Herbst get the chance and opportunity. And I do think he will run full-time with this team for 2025. And if he improves, that could really help him in his case going into the future, as he will stay in the 6-7 car, in my opinion, for 2026 going forward. Up next, up with the 71 car for Spire Motorsports. There won't be any changes in the seat, as Michael McDowell has a multi-year contract with Spire Motorsports to drive the 71. Now, I do think there's a chance that 2026 could be the final year for Michael McDowell in Cup, as McDowell will be 42 or 43 by that point. But Michael McDowell's proven himself over the last year, and I think he's going to be a big part in really helping building this program up. So I don't think anything changes going into the future. McDowell, I think, will stay there, and Travis Peterson will continue being the crew chief of this car. Up next, up with the 77 car for Spire Motorsports. There won't be any changes for 2026, as I think Carson Nospar will stick around in the 77 car for the long-term future. He's looking to build Spire Motorsports program up, which I think he's going to be really able to do that. He's been super solid as a young driver, and he's been super impressive and super quick. So I do think he continues driving his seat once again. He's done a great job, done a lot of great things, and I think he will 100% for sure stick around with Spire Motorsports for the long term and the foreseeable future. Up next, how about the 84 car for Legacy Motor Club? I think Legacy Motor Club buys a charter from a team like Colleague Racing, perhaps, and I do think that you're going to see Corey Heim go full-time Cup racing finally in 2026. While I do think by 2027 he may end up in a 2311 car, I think he's going to get loaned out over to Legacy Motor Club for 2026 because he's expected to stay in trucks. And I think with him already working with Legacy, I think he moves up full-time with them over there in 2026. Unless somehow, some way Eric Jones leaves the team, I think you see Corey Heim go full-time Cup Series racing in 2026. Up next, how about the 88 car for Junior Motorsports? I think Junior Motorsports finds a way to move up to the Cup Series, at least part-time, maybe full-time, with the drivers in our Junior Motorsports group. I think this includes Connor Zilic and Sammy Smith. I think Connor Zilic is going to get a ton of starts with him being super talented. He said he wants to be the youngest Cup Series champion ever, which I believe the youngest champion is either 24 or 23 years old. So you need to have him in there very quickly. So I think Connor Zilic gets a majority of the starts. And I do think Junior Motorsports, yes, will be in the Cup Series in some sort of capacity in 2026. Up next, up in the 97 car for Trackhouse Racing. There won't be any changes for 2026 as Shane Van Gisbergen is expected to join Trackhouse Racing in 2025, and I do think he'll be behind the wheel of a Trackhouse car for sure in 26. Shane, I think, is going to have a very impressive full-time rookie year. I think he's going to win a race or two, and he might win an oval in some sort of capacity as well. I think Shane's super talented. I think everyone's expecting it at this point that he's going to move up, and I truly do believe that SVG will get better in year one and continue to improve also full-time in year number 2. And finally, let's talk about the 99 car for Trackhouse. I don't think anything changes for 2026. I do think Daniel Suarez will be behind the wheel of this car for the 2026 season. They're expected to sign a multi-year contract extension for Daniel Suarez at Trackhouse Racing. I think that will be brought, but I think 2026 might be his last year with the team, as if his performance does not step up with him being in his mid-30s, I do think there's a chance he can be let go at the end of 2026 or go to Spire, but I do think Daniel Suarez will get his contract honored and will stick through 2026. So anyways, those are my 2026 NASCAR Cup Series silly season predictions. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so if I win a video, it does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support on Patreon as well. Let's go below that and comment your thoughts below on today's episode. What are your predictions? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I don't think anything else is going to be dropping on the channel today. Tomorrow there'll be a NASCAR news video on the channel. Tuesday might have 2025 silly season predictions, something like that, or might have a video on 10 drivers who could join the Haas factory team. And then on Wednesday we should have a NASCAR news video dropping. I got lots of great content dropping over the course of the next couple weeks that I cannot wait for you guys to check out. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.